Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Paul and this is reporting live from my sofa. Today we're going to be talking about the Anthony Todd family massacre. Now there are numerous layers to this case, and when I started looking into it I was just like, wait, what? So we're going to talk about a few different things here. We're going to go over the case timeline. We're going to go over some information about the town celebration that it took place in, because there's a lot of irony and eeriness around that. And then even more so than that, we're going to talk about the family history of Anthony Todd. It seems that murdering spouses travels in this family. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's cover some of the basics of this crime. So sometime around late December, Anthony Todd killed his family along with the family dog in Celebration, Florida. Now, Celebration is a town that was developed by Walt Disney Company. It's no longer owned by them, but we'll actually talk more in detail about that because it's really added another really eerie level to this case. Now, I'm going to list off the victims. First of all, there's 42-year-old Megan Todt, his wife. Then we have 11-year-old Tyler Todd, as well as 13-year-old Alec Todd. There's also 4-year-old Zoe Todd, and then there's Breezy, the family dog. Now, the massacre is literally just the surface level to this heinous crime. On December 29th, a family relative requested a well-being check be done on the residents down in Celebration, Florida. So after receiving this, the deputies went to the home and they talked to neighbors and they checked things out, and things just didn't look out of place to them. You know, neighbors said, look, they have a business up in Connecticut. It's normal for the Celebration house to be empty. And basically the cops are like, look, you know what? We can't really invade in on somebody if they've just been sick and not contacting anybody. So with all that being said, the cops left. Let's fast forward a little bit now. When the deputies went for that original wellness check, they had no idea that Mr. Todd was being investigated by the United States Department of Health and Human Services for something completely unrelated. On January 9th, that same sheriff's office was contacted by federal agents requesting that they help them execute an arrest warrant. They tried making contact with Todd over the weekend, but they couldn't. But finally that Monday morning, they were able to catch up with him. After the deputies secured him, that's when they went into the home to check things out, and that's when the gruesome discovery of the 4 bodies and the family dog were found. Now, before they took him to jail, they took him to the hospital because Anthony made some kind of claims about possibly harming himself and having taken Benadryl or something along the lines of that. So they take him to the hospital, he checks out fine, and then obviously they cart him to jail. Now that we have the basics of what took place, let's go down a couple of rabbit holes real quick that are going to provide us some more answers as well as some insight into what the picture of this crime looks like. Is Celebration really a Disney town? Yes, it is. It's the best place to live, apparently, until now. So Celebration's a very interesting town. It's basically what I consider a concept town. These towns have been popping up for quite some time, not specifically owned by Disney, but just the idea of them. Now, this one is owned by Disney, and we're going to go into some details about how that came about. So I went to the Town of Celebration's website, and I want to read something right off of it because it really paints a picture as to what they wanted to create with this. The Celebration community was formed with the concept of building a better place and a better way to live. There's a reason Celebration is not a town, but a community in every positive sense of the word. Now, if you ask me, that sounds very Disney-esque. Now, Walt Disney Company founded the Celebration Company to achieve the goals of a picture-perfect town. Imagine living at Disney World. Now, there's 5 hallmarks of these communities. Number 1 is a sense of community. Number 2 is a sense of place. Number 3, a focus on technology. Number 4, a focus on education. And number 5, a focus on health. The first residents moved into the town of Celebration in 1996. So the town's really not that old in the scheme of things. Let's go over some quick facts that the website lists about the town of Celebration. This community is situated in northwest Osceola County, Florida. Now, the homes and the condos and the general look of the place is a mixture of styles. These range from classical, colonial, French, coastal, Mediterranean, and Victorian. Now these do have modern floor plans, and most of the homes have like a really welcoming porch, and they have access to rear garages via a service alley. It's all very Stepford Wives sounding. There are 5 huge recreational areas and multiple amenities. There's a community center, there's like over 40 neighborhood parks, and more than 26 miles of walking trails. Now they have commercial areas as well. There's downtown Celebration, there's water tower shops. Now there's approximately 10,000 residences and 4,300 homes and condos. In addition to the heinousness of the crime, the fact that it took place in this Disney-esque type place really kind of freaked people out. So like I said, there's many other issues at play in this case. One of them being the federal investigation. So let's talk about that for a minute. Now, some of the activities of the family, like in the weeks and time leading up to this, are going to help shed light on what was going on. Because what we're going to see is a picture of a family's life, whether they knew about it or not, but especially Anthony Todt's life, crumbling to pieces. So let's talk about some basic. Now the family had 2 homes there in Celebration, and they also had businesses up in Connecticut. Both Anthony and Megan were physical therapists. Anthony's license expired last September, and Megan's was going to expire this month. Anthony Todt ran a family physical therapy center in Colchester, Connecticut. Some of his business neighbors there in Connecticut said they saw federal agents around there a few months ago. So Todt owns a company named Performance Edge Sports LLC. They do business as family physical therapy, and they have 2 offices in Connecticut. Another thing going on is that Todt was severely in debt. He owed around $99,000 to creditors in New York. He was also about $6,000 behind on rent in their Celebration home. In fact, on December 22nd, the landlord, the owner of the condo at Reserve Place, filed an eviction notice and served it on December 26th. So let's dive in a little bit deeper on this FBI investigation. Now, back in April of 2019, the FBI and the United States Health and Human Services launched an investigation into Todt and his practices. A criminal complaint was filed stating that Todt committed healthcare fraud from January 1st, 2015 to November 21st, 2019. Now, there's a woman and her children who remained unnamed, and they were treated at the family practice there in Connecticut. Now, she would refer to his company as a mess, saying like the turnover rate was insane, and because of that, the place just seemed really disorganized. Now, agents were able to document several things that went wrong with the billing of this particular woman and her children. One of them was he was billing stuff for her that was like impossible, like times where they were closed or after hours, things of this nature. Even after her family moved away, he was still submitting bills for her and the children. I mean, come on. November 20th, 2019, agents move in. They search the businesses that he has there in Connecticut, and they actually interview him that day. Now, keep in mind the dates of this. Sometime in the late December, this is when the massacre took place. November 20th, so this is where things are really closing in on him. When they interviewed him, he said that he had owned the practice for 11 years, and that he was the only one that did the billing. Now, during that search, they obviously took things. Files, patient files, records, anything they could get their hands on like that. They took it to gather evidence and do more research. They found that between January 2015 and June 2018, he had taken out 20 loans for the business. Now, as we all know with situations like this, these like short-term lenders in places like that, yeah, it was a quick band-aid to put on the bleeding, but they also took money directly out of the company's banking account. So he got into that cycle that we see with these predatory, almost like these check cashing stores. This is when he says he began charging for procedures that never took place, and he began milking Medicare, Medicaid, things of this nature. He said that that was easier than trying to borrow money. And basically, he said he defrauded the government to keep pace, to keep up with his personal loans. So during this, he was actually being cooperative. He was going to agree to plead guilty, to get his lawyers to work out some type of a plea deal, but then he kind of disappeared. When he didn't follow up with the agents after December 4th, 2019, they went out looking for him, obviously, and they went out to his businesses and found his employees. Now, they said that Todd never returned back from celebration to see any of his patients for the month of December. Now, there was one employee that Todd kept up with through like random sporadic text messages, they said, but that was it. And some of the workers said that their paychecks started bouncing, and essentially everyone just quit going to work and the place shut down. By January 6th, when an agent showed up to one of the businesses, there was an eviction notice on the door saying that he hadn't paid rent for December or January and owed over $6,000 on those as well. Now, it seems as if Todd has been painted into a corner. Just like with the federal investigation, which obviously is ongoing, all this has collided at one time. Authorities are saying he is being cooperative so far in the investigation into the murders. He has been charged with 4 counts of premeditated murder and 1 count of cruelty to animals. Obviously, he has no bond. There's no bond on those murder charges, and I think the bond on the cruelty to animals is like $1,500. But just when you think, oh, that's it, let's wait to see if it goes to trial and what else happens. We haven't even gotten to that point when more crazy stuff is coming out. Let's talk about Anthony Todd's father. So Anthony's parents' names are Robert and Loretta. Now, when Anthony was just a small little boy, like around 4 years old, his father hired a hitman to try and kill his wife, Anthony's mother, Loretta. Now, the attempt was not successful, and Loretta actually lost one of her eyes in this process. Now, both Anthony and his sister were in the house when this happened, and Anthony even has memory of seeing the assailants, as well as one of them putting him back in the bedroom. Anthony said that he was woken up by his mother screaming, and when he went in there and saw someone was wrestling on the bed with her, and another guy picked him up and put him back in the bed. So let's talk about his father, Robert. Robert was a special education teacher as well as the wrestling coach in Pennsylvania. He hired an ex-student of his who had learning disabilities to carry out the crime. Robert was found guilty of attempted homicide, criminal conspiracy, and criminal solicitation. The judge sentenced him to a 5 to 10 year prison sentence on the attempted murder charge. He received another 5 to 10 year sentence for the criminal conspiracy, as well as the criminal solicitation convictions, and those were to be served consecutively. Now, at Robert's trial, even more weird stuff happened. First of all, the main witness, the key component here, was the boy, the young man that he hired to carry the crime out. Now, his name was John Chermont. Now, like I said, he had some learning disabilities. He was a drug user, an alcoholic, and he had a criminal record. Basically, he was a very vulnerable person, it sounded like to me. Now, he was arrested on some other charge, and this is when the information about his attack on Loretta Todd came out. He did get a deal, and in exchange for testifying against Robert, he would serve no more than 5 years for his part in the crime. Now, his testimony would say that in 1980, Robert offered him $800 to carry the crime out. Now, at first, he says that Robert wanted him to basically execute this very elaborate plan of kidnapping the wife after she left work and taking her somewhere, but he was really uneasy about doing that. So Robert devised another plan where he gave Chermont a key to the house and basically said, look, make it look like a robbery, that type situation. So after Chermont executed the plans and did the shooting and whatnot, he rifled through the house and tried to make it look like someone had broken and, gone through the house and stolen things. One logical question is, why did Robert want his wife dead? Well, let's get into it, because it gets even crazier. Testimony that came out on the stand would show he was engaged to another woman. And this woman actually took the stand. Another woman would take the stand who was a 17-year-old student at the high school and testified to being in some kind of little situation with Robert. Robert would eventually take the stand as well, and he would actually sit there and admit, look, you know what? I had nothing to do with the shooting, but I was having an affair, but I was also lying to her. I had no plans on actually ever marrying her. While Todd denied that he hired John Chermont, he said, look, I picked the kid up to bring him back to the house to help him work on like a resume or something like that. Apparently, other testimony would show that that was a normal thing for him to do. But he says this whole thing about, oh, I hired him to kill my wife and yada, yada, yada. It's just not true. Ironically, Robert's alibi for that night was he was at his mistress's house till almost midnight. When he came home, he walked into the scenario of the neighbors helping his wife out because she had been shot. Obviously, he had no plans on her living. Now, this case takes an even stranger turn. Robert ended up only serving like 10 years in prison. His wife, Loretta, was initially in total denial, and she stood by him. In fact, she was actually upset when he was convicted, and she just believed that he did not do this crime, and he was wrongfully convicted. People in the trial even said that she was yelling and wailing and screaming and crying at the prosecutor when he was found guilty in that moment. So eventually she moves down to Connecticut, and during that time is when she's like, wait a minute, hold on now, maybe he really did try and kill me. She basically accepts the reality for what it is, that yeah, Robert tried to kill her. She divorces him, and she gets remarried. Now, Robert has not run into any more situations of killing spouses. In fact, he is free. He's remarried. Now, Chermont did get his deal, but he was not able to stay out of trouble. In 2014, he was accused of setting an arson fire to commit insurance fraud. He received a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 to 20 years. And there in state prison he sits. So, like I said, this is a very complicated case on so many levels. I mean, it just doesn't stop going. We are going to be following this one to see what comes of it. Again, this has just happened. I mean, just happened. So we don't know if this will go to trial. We don't know what will happen. The fact that he's being very cooperative, maybe he'll end up pleading out. We don't know. We'll have to see. So that's it. Don't forget to check out our podcast and some of the other links down below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more stuff by me, don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll talk to you later, Sofa Squad.